Chapter 39 of The Hand of Fu-Manchu. This recording is in the public domain. The Hand of Fu-Manchu by Sax Rohmer. Chapter 39. The Shadow Army. The scene of our return to Graywater Park is destined to live in my memory forever. The storm, of which the violent rainfall had been a prelude, gathered blackly over the hills. Ebon clouds lowered upon us as we came racing to the gates. Then the big car was spinning around the carriage sweep, amid a deathly stillness of nature indescribably gloomy and ominous. I have said a stillness of nature, but, as Kennedy leapt out and ran up the steps to the door, from the distant cages wherein Sir Lionel kept his collection of rare beasts proceeded the angry howling of the leopards, and such a wild succession of roars from the African lioness, that I stared at our eccentric host questioningly. "It's the gathering storm," he explained. "These creatures are particularly susceptible to atmospheric disturbances." Now the door was thrown open, and, standing in the lighted hall, a picture fair to look upon in her dainty kimono and little red high-heeled slippers, stood Karamaneh. I was beside her in a moment, for the lovely face was pale, and there was a wildness in her eyes which alarmed me. "He is somewhere near," she whispered, clinging to me. "Some great danger threatens. Where have you been? What has happened?" "Smith was attacked on his way back from London," I replied, "but as you see he is quite recovered. We are in no danger, and I insist that you go back to bed. We shall tell you all about it in the morning." Rebellion blazed up in her wonderful eyes instantly, and as quickly was gone, leaving them exquisitely bright. Two tears like twin pearls hung upon the curved black lashes. It made my blood course faster to watch this lovely Eastern girl conquering the barbaric impulses that sometimes flamed up within her, because I willed it. Indeed, this was a miracle that I never tired of witnessing. Mrs. Oram, the white-haired housekeeper, placed her arm in motherly fashion about the girl's slim waist. "She wants to stay in my room until the trouble is all over," she said in her refined, sweet voice. "You are very good, Mrs. Oram," I replied. "Take care of her." One long, reassuring glance I gave Karamaneh, then turned and followed Smith and Sir Lionel up the winding oak stair. Kennedy came close behind me, carrying one of the acetylene headlamps of the car, and "Just listen to the lioness, sir," he whispered. "It's not the gathering storm that's making her so restless. Jungle beasts grow quiet as a rule when there's thunder about." The snarling of the great creature was plainly audible, distant though we were from her cage. "Through your room, Barton," snapped Nayland Smith when we gained the top corridor. He was his old masterful self once more, and his voice was vibrant with that suppressed excitement which I knew well. Into the disorderly sleeping apartment of the baronet we hurried, and Smith made for the recess near the bed which concealed a door in the panelling. "Cautiously here," cried Smith. "Follow immediately behind me, Kennedy, and throw the beam ahead. Hold the lamp well to the left." In we filed, into that ancient passage which had figured in many a black deed, but had never served the ends of a more evil plotter than the awful Chinaman who had so recently rediscovered it. Down we marched, and down, but not to the base of the tower, as I had anticipated. At a point which I judged to be about level with the first floor of the house, Smith, who had been audibly counting the steps, paused, and began to examine the seemingly unbroken masonry of the wall. "We have to remember," he muttered, "that this passage may be blocked up or otherwise impassable, and that Fu Manchu may know of another entrance. Furthermore, since the plan is lost, I have to rely upon my memory for the exact position of the door." He was feeling about in the crevices between the stone blocks of which the wall was constructed. "21 steps," he muttered. "I feel certain." Suddenly it seemed that his quest had proved successful. "Ah!" he cried, "the ring!" I saw that he had drawn out a large iron ring from some crevice in which it had been concealed. "Stand back, Kennedy," he warned. Kennedy moved on to a lower step, as Smith, bringing all his weight to bear upon the ring, turned the huge stone slab upon its hidden pivot, so that it fell back upon the stair with a reverberating boom. We all pressed forward to peer into the black cavity. Kennedy moving the light, a square well was revealed, not more than 3 feet across. Footholes were cut at intervals down the further side. "Hmm," said Smith. "I was hardly prepared for this. A method of descent that occurs to me is to lean back against one side and thrust one's weight entirely to the footholds on the other. A shaft appeared in the plan, I remember, but I had formed no theory respecting the means provided for descending it. Tilt the lamp forward, Kennedy. Good. Now I can see the floor of the passage below, only about 15 feet or so down." He stretched his foot across, placed it in the niche, and began to descend. "Kennedy next," came his muffled voice. "With the lamp. Its light will enable you others to see the way." Down went Kennedy without hesitation, the lamp swung from his right arm. "I will bring up the rear," said Sir Lionel Barton. Whereupon I descended. I had climbed down about half way when, from below, came a loud cry, a sound of scuffling, and a savage exclamation from Smith. Then: "We're right, Petrie. This passage was recently used by Fu-Manchu." I gained the bottom of the well, and found myself standing in the entrance to the arched passage. Kennedy was directing the light of the lamp down upon the floor. "You see, the door was guarded," said Nayland Smith. "What?" "Puff adder," he snapped, and indicated a small snake whose head was crushed beneath his heel. Sir Lionel now joined us, and, a silent quartet, we stood staring from the dead reptile into the damp and evil-smelling tunnel. A distant muttering and rumbling rolled, echoing awesomely along it. "For Heaven's sake, what is that, sir?" whispered Kennedy. "It was the thunder," answered Nayland Smith. "The storm is breaking over the hills. Steady with the lamp, my man." We had proceeded for some 300 yards, and, according to my calculation, were clear of the orchard of Graywater Park, and close to the fringe of trees beyond. I was taking note of the curious old brickwork of the passage, when— "Look out, sir!" cried Kennedy, and the light began dancing madly. "Just under your feet! Now it's up the wall! Mind your hand, Dr. Petrie!" The lamp was turned, and since it shone fully into my face, temporarily blinded me. "On the roof, over your head, Barton." This from Nayland Smith. "What can we kill it with?" Now my sight was restored to me, and looking back along the passage, I saw, clinging to an irregularity in the mouldy wall, the most gigantic scorpion I had ever set eyes upon. It was fully as large as my open hand. Kennedy and Nayland Smith were stealthily retracing their steps, the former keeping the light directed upon the hideous insect, which now began running about with that horrible febrile activity characteristic of the species. Suddenly came a sharp staccato report. Sir Lionel had scored a hit with his Browning pistol. In waves of sound the report went booming along the passage. The lamp, as I have said, was turned in order to shine back upon us, rendering the tunnel ahead a mere black mouth, a veritable inferno, held by inhuman guards. Into that black cavern I stared, gloomily fascinated by the onward rolling sound storm. Into that blackness I looked, to feel my scalp tingle horrifically, to know the crowning horror of the horrible journey. The blackness was spangled with watching, diamond eyes, with tiny insect eyes that moved, upon the floor, upon the walls, upon the ceiling. A choking cry rose to my lips. "Smith! Barton! For God's sake, look! The place is alive with scorpions!" Around we all came, panic plucking at our hearts. Around swept the beam of the big lamp, and there, retreating before the light, went a veritable army of venomous creatures. I counted no fewer than 3 of the giant red centipede whose poisonous touch, called the Zayat Kiss, is certain death. Several species of scorpion were represented, and some kind of bloated, unwieldy spider, so gross of body that its short, hairy legs could scarce support it, crawled hideous almost at my feet. What other monstrosities of the insect kingdom were included in that obscene host I know not. My skin tingled from head to feet. I experienced a sensation as if a million venomous things already clung to me. Unclean things, bred in the malarial jungles of Burma, in that corpse-tainted mud of China's rivers, in the fever spots of that darkest East from which Fu Manchu recruited his shadow army. I was perilously near to losing my nerve when the crisp, incisive tones of Nayland Smith's voice came to stimulate me like a cold douche. "This wanton sacrifice of horror speaks eloquently of a forlorn hope. Sweep the walls with light, Kennedy. All those filthy things are nocturnal, and they will retreat before us as we advance." His words proved true. Occasioning a sort of rustling sound, a faint